The Department of Sports, Arts and Culture has prioritised its budget allocation to provide the much-needed relief to practitioners in the sector. The allocated funds will be utilised to render various forms of support during this period. Priority will be given to artists and creatives who were already booked by some of the cancelled and postponed events funded by the department, as well as to the legends of the industry and other people in this industry. And for more on this, we chat to Dr. Sithole, the culture practitioner and research fellow at the University of Johannesburg. Dr. Sithole, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Morning. Thank you very much, Sipho, and thanks for inviting me.
That's an absolute pleasure. Now, the Minister has announced some interventions to help creatives and cultural artists during this time. You spoke to the Minister and you were part of the board, tasked with finding solutions. Do fill us in about the funds that were allocated to provide to practitioners in the sector.
Yes, maybe before we talk about the actual funds, let me just bring you up to speed about what could have been the impact had the department and our government not intervened to provide this much-funded relief. We refer to this sector as the cultural industries, cultural and creative industry, cultural and creative sector. And that has to do with people who are involved in cultural and natural heritage, in performance and celebration, in visual arts, books, audiovisual, design and creative such as fashion, as well as other transversal cultural education. And that alone is over 1 million people that this sector employs in this country. And that's about 7.03% of jobs. This is the study that is done by the South African Cultural Observatory, which I'm also part of. I'm on that board. So you can see that the impact would have meant that those people, over a million people, would not have had any employment during this time, because most of them are not having a guaranteed monthly income, just because of the way that they are employed. I mean, as we are talking about, whether it's artists or musicians, they get employed through the jobs. Once they've got a job that has been confirmed. And also, if you look at between 2016 and 2018, this sector grew at 2.4% between the 2016 and 2018. The rest of the country, the rest of the economy was growing at 1.1%. So it's a very important sector for this country. People tend to reduce it into some form of entertainment. But if we have a festival like Cape Town Jazz or Standard Bank Joe of Jazz here in Johannesburg, you can imagine how many people, just besides the artist that is on stage and the band that is backing the artist, how many people are employed in the stage management, in the technical areas and all of that. So that is really the impact. So then back to your question, the funds that the government is providing is really much needed. But I've always made one argument, Sipho, that it does not matter how much. So we can talk about, is it enough or is it not enough? It doesn't matter how much. It could have been R1 trillion for all you know. One of the biggest challenges we are facing in this country is that we cannot really identify who is the person, who is the group that performs on weekends in Deep Sloot every time there's a wedding. Are they now going to go and queue up and say, we were supposed to perform at various weddings and funerals, and all of those have now been cancelled or postponed, so we are not earning any income. So the challenge that we are facing in this country is to clearly identify and accredit or have some form of identification that anybody who has this kind of identification does qualify. So the problems that we are going to have now is there will be a lot of people who will benefit. There will also be a lot of people who won't benefit. And these are the challenges that we are facing right now.
You're quite right there, Dr. Sithole. I mean, the arts and the cultural sector is a very key medium for the country's economy. As we've just said, I mean, it's not really about entertainment, but it is about the livelihoods of so many South Africans. And of course, the South African Cultural Observatory, said that the contribution that the cultural and the arts industries in South Africa contributes about 63 billion rand per year to the the economy. That's about 1.7% to the country's GDP. And what was initially proposed to the minister, Mr. Sithole, before the lockdown? I mean, what were the recommendations which are made?
That's a good question, Sipho. We had not anticipated the lockdown. What got us jumping up and down was when the president announced, and rightfully so, and responsibly so, that they will be limiting the number of people that can be together at any point in time. Was to then say to the minister, when we met with the minister, was that let the show go on, minister, with or without audiences, because we now live in the fourth industrial revolution. You don't have to have people lining up at the Market Theatre or at the Playhouse in Durban buying tickets, but you can still have a band on stage performing, being streamed live at the comfort and safety of your home, watching it in your devices like you and I are now talking on Skype, and I can see you and you can see me. So you and I could have already been singing now, so to speak, and entertain people who are watching us on television. So that was one of the many suggestions that we made. But I think I must also stress the fact that the entire cultural and creative sector was behind the call of many voices, one message. So there was support, and there is support that we were not going to go the other way when our country is suggesting that we need to create awareness and highlight the impact of this coronavirus. So that was some of that. And as you can see now, our department has gone out for a call for people to make submissions. So if you are a painter, you can actually apply. So even if let's just say you are a painter as Sipho and you are at home and you are now taking the nation through what does fine art mean. You could already start streaming at home and say, these are the elements that are involved in fine art. I use a pencil or I use a canvas and I do this. If you are a poet, you can already start doing your poetry at home and stream it live. So part of those suggestions were that, and that also includes whether it was film, people who were supposed to have gone into productions because they were producing stuff for SABC as an example, and they can no longer be there. And as long as you could prove that there was a contract signed and commitments made to the creatives, that you can now go claim. Yeah. So personally, I am really, really happy with the speed in which our minister and the department ran to make sure that at least this is done. And I've been told that over 6,000 applications have been received by the department, and I really feel sorry for them to go through over 6,000.
Now, Dr. Sithole, let's just get to the bolts and the nuts of the beneficiation process. Do the artists need to be registered first to benefit off the aid? Are there any boards being made available to help and support the people in this industry?
That's the point I was raising earlier on, that it doesn't matter how much money the government could set aside, because we have a lot of people who are involved in this sector, and there are those who are known nationally. So if you are Sibongile Khumalo, no one is going to even doubt, okay, Sibongile Khumalo had these shows and Sibongile Khumalo has made this application. But a guy in Diepsloot who does traditional dance every time there is a wedding is not even known. True. And how do they then come and prove themselves? So there is work that I think that this event is teaching us, that immediately after we come out of this situation, we need to now join our forces and engage government to talk about how do we accredit this sector so that people can be known. Is it based on your earnings? But of course, we are working with other organizations to identify, such as SAMRO, the RISA, the Recording Industries, ECHO, the Association of Independent Recording Industries, SAMPRA, CAPASO, IMPRA, including the record companies. So I'm talking about just the music side. But what about the poets and the dancers? And the filmmakers, I think, at least I know, that's a well-organized sector that they've got various associations or organizations of people who are involved in film. But what about all the others that don't have a structure? And we do have the Cultural Industries Federation of South Africa, is called SIFSA, who's tasked with making sure that this whole industry is organized, organized to the tiniest detail. Because the SIFSA is a federation, it's an umbrella body of the entire cultural and creative industries. And of course, the unions would play a role. And I know that there are unions that are coming up now that are really working hard in making sure that they organize this sector.
All right, Dr. Sithole, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we appreciate your valuable insights on this matter. We just spoke to Dr. Sipho Sithole, the culture practitioner and the research fellow at the University of Johannesburg, on the funds that the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture has made available for the creative industry. We'll take a quick break.